that could go on for a long time. So I'm here today as myself, Josh, to talk about my beloved Paul Reed Smith guitar and about Guitars USA music store where I got it. So this is just story time. This is how I came to play this guitar, how I came to be a supporter of this particular music store. And so today I'm here to make a video and just kind of tell y'all that story. So the story of this guitar doesn't start with this guitar. It starts really with my friend Dustie Waring. Dustie is a stand-up guy, really generous dude, the kind that you find plenty of in, you know, rural, somewhat not rural Winston-Salem. You know, he's a city boy, but he's of good country stock. And a lot of my favorite people are that way. And what's not common about Dusty is that he's got his name on many of Paul Reed Smith guitars, and he's built a career to support all of that with his band Between the Buried and Me, which he's been in for, I don't know exactly how long, but at least a decade now. So I think it's actually probably more than a dozen years. So Dusty and I became acquainted through the Winston-Salem music scene because I was out playing funk jams, you know, and all that stuff, and he would come out and support the local scene when he was home. And he just talks to everybody. He's a friend, you know, he's a friendly guy. And apparently he thought that I could play well enough that he could say that you did a good job and not feel like he was lying. So we struck up a friendship, and as he does with a lot of his friends, he likes to have them experience this gear, because not only does he have, you know, stock core PRS models, which are fantastic enough just as instruments, he also has, before he had his signature even, has extremely special, one-of-a-kind Paul Reed Smith guitars and things that have been made for him and things like that. So at that time I had kind of the, okay, those are the lawyer guitars, you know, idea about Paul Reed Smith, and not in a mean way and not out of ignorance either, because I had worked at the B-String guitar shop and I had played plenty of used Paul Reed Smith guitars and a handful of new ones as well. And my impression of them was a lot like I think a lot of people's, where I was just like, it's obviously well made. They are expensive, but I don't think unreasonably expensive. There's nothing artificial about the cost of them. They're handmade, I'm sorry, that's not accurate, but they're largely influenced by a lot of handwork in the USA, and you just can't pay people, you know, to work in the US the way that you can in Indonesia or somewhere like that. So even if the components and all weren't as excellent as they are, and they are, just even the handiwork, honestly, now that I've learned more about how it's all done, I'm like, yeah, these are probably the most underpriced instruments on the market. So in any event, I developed a relationship, even though my perception of PRS didn't change that much in terms of, well, it's a well-made guitar, but it just didn't really super get me. And this, by the way, this is not a sales video for PRS, it's just, fact is, this is what I've chosen, and so that's what I'm leading up to. I had grown up on a Gibson SG. It was black. This one reminds me a little bit of that. I've always loved the tone of Les Pauls. Jumping ahead a little bit here, and of course this is inspired, shall we say, by a Les Paul with a double cutaway. So it kind of gives me a little of the reminiscence of the SG, the Tony Iommi, the Santana that I love, of a more aggressive rock approach with the huge tone and the versatility of a Les Paul, which I don't feel that SGs do quite as well. So in any event, over time, I developed a relationship to where I was a little more open-minded about maybe, and then at one point, Guitars USA in November of 2016 had a crazy sale, and they had a Paul's guitar, a 2015 Paul's guitar with one-piece top, which is uncommon. Typically very expensive. It's just supply and demand. You don't get that many one-piece beautiful tops that are worth using, a quilted top. But the finish was fairly dark, and so unless you really had it like under stage lights or something like that, some of the effect was kind of lost. And so it had sat, despite being a fantastic guitar. One of my friends, Rick Rich, he played it, and the bass was so tight, and every note was so popping and so musical. He was just like, this is a masterpiece of an instrument. And they had an incredible deal because they were ready to move it on. So at that time, I then decided to get my first Paul Reed Smith guitar. And it didn't stay with me. I had the feeling that I kind of expected to have, which was, this is an incredible instrument, and it was perfectly made, it was beautiful, it sounded great, and I was just yearning for a more classic sound, because the Paul's guitar is it's not a PAF, you know, they have the narrow field, I believe they're called pickups. It's made for him to be a guitar in a 3-guitar band, so the sound of those guitars and their pickups is designed to give a humbucker lover a sound roughly in that ballpark, but that will work more like a P90 or a single coil. Not sound like, but work like a P90 or a single coil in a band setting, meaning it cuts through and it has a very defined space in the frequency range so that you're not mushing up other people and vice versa. So I ended up moving on, trading that for some other stuff, some more vintage stuff that was to my liking, and basically turning, you know, this investment into that investment and swapping it out. And that was fine. So fast forward, May 2017. So we're looking at almost 3 years ago now, which is very hard for me to believe, but yeah, it's right there on the headstock. By the way, we'll get to the signature eventually, but you see the 17 there at the beginning. May of 17, at this point I was in the habit of visiting Guitars USA when I could. They were in Lexington, they're now in Winston-Salem, thankfully for me. And I was in Germantown, so it was about a 45 minute ride, 45 minute ride down there. But I was in the habit of visiting when I could, and saw that they were having a PRS clinic for Boscoe France. And at the time I just thought, well, that's a weird name. And I wanted to go because I had never seen him, you know, I'd never heard of him. Started to look into him, I asked Dusty about him. Of course, Dusty was just like, you know, he is just like badass blues, slide, deep fried rock and roll sound, just stuff that really gets me going, and where I'm come from with Allman Brothers and Black Crowes and music that I love. So I went to the clinic, and the clinic, of course, the way those work is you have your rep, who in this case is Claiborne Lord, and they are traveling with the artist. The artist is bringing their unique medicine of music to saying, this is how I approach things, or if there's any technical stuff people want to explain, you know, they can talk about that. And of course, it's a sales opportunity for the company. That's, you know, the bottom line part of it, not at all the entire point, but, you know, what sort of justifies how things happen. So Clay was traveling, had the whole 17 lineup in there, and this here guitar was sitting on a stand like any other, and as you can see, as far as PRS guitars go, it's very unassuming. If it weren't for the carved top, it would be incredibly plain looking, and the birds, right? The body itself would be very plain looking. And so at first, that it didn't turn me off, it just made me not see it. I just didn't, I mean, I saw it, but I didn't see it, because of course, even though crazy flame tops and weird purple haze finishes and stuff are eye-catching, they're not, even though they're not my thing, they're very eye-catching. So I was noticing all of that, but then kind of just like quietly, you know, just like sitting there on a stand. You had this here, PRS McCarty 594, and eventually I went and picked it up. It was set up pretty stout. It definitely had it didn't have like a shreddy, you know, you want to play your sweep arpeggio runs feel with the setup. It was set up like a guitar you're made to go, like, you know, I guess I done put my amp in standby to kill the noise, but you know, it's the kind of guitar you go, and then you're like, that sounds good. That's that kind of guitar. So I picked it up, started playing it, and at this point, this is very much like the story of me adopting my dog, where it was like, I had no actual thought in my mind. Maybe I was kidding myself, but I had no actual thought in my mind of how I'm going to, you know, that I'm going to maybe do something with this. So I tried it, and I sort of forgot about it, went through the clinic, and then afterwards, I don't know, something about it, it was that synchronicity of everything being right. If it hadn't been Boscoe that night, I wouldn't own this guitar. And it wasn't as direct as, well, Boscoe France inspired me so much, and I just got to get a PRS, another core PRS. It wasn't like that. It was just some kind of a connection about where he was coming from with his music and his life story, He's a very down-to-earth guy. His life is very normal when it's not the life of a traveling guitar player. Normal. He's a family man. And there was something really relatable about that, because I've always felt extremely torn between, well, do I live a musician's life with all the insecurity and all the travel and all the never being home and all the, you know, ruined relationships that goes with being a traveling artist? Or do I give up the music so that I can have some kind of normalcy? And it always felt like, man, they're both just terrible options. And so I think on some level, Bosco personally gave me some hope that, like, oh, okay, maybe there's something. Maybe there's like a way in here. And I wasn't thinking of all that consciously, but it just, in retrospect, that's how I was kind of connecting with him. As far as the guitar, I went and picked it up afterwards because, you know, still to this day, like custom 24s, I still kind of want one just because it's the quintessential PRS, but it's not really my bag. 24 fret guitars aren't for me. I came from a Gibson background, so I like a big old fat neck, and I like 22 frets, and I like something that sounds more like, that isn't trying to have so much of a new, unique voice the way that PRS guitars do. And this one's still unique, but it's much more of a, frankly, you know, a Gibson heritage. I mean, Ted McCarty has his name on the thing, so there's no shame or there's no problem in saying that. So Ted McCarty, who helped design most of Gibson's famous guitars. So afterwards, I pick up the guitar because it was the only one that really spoke to me. The others didn't so much. And again, not really having much of a thought of it, I sat down on stage, and at this point, I was still pretty nervous and didn't believe in my playing that much, but I was, I guess, getting bold enough that I was like, I'm gonna sit down next to Bosco, or like while he's on stage, and just kind of play. And I think on some level I was like, I knew how to kind of talk to him in that way, because I started playing, well, I'll just show you, since I have a guitar and an amplifier and all of that stuff. I started playing the Allman Brothers Band. Something like, let me get my tone right. Something like, see, I can get carried away again, and that was the feeling with the guitar. And Bosco actually picked up a guitar, and we traded back and forth on, you know, the original 1/4 jam track, Blue Sky. So that was the feeling, and something just kind of happened in there. So here we are, I'm thinking about this guitar. Clay's not supposed to sell it because it's a stage. He's got to travel with these guitars, and this is the guitar that he has to tell the East Coast that this is what a McCarty 594 is. Y'all can look up the specs and all that stuff if you want, but basically big fat mahogany body, much fatter than the normal McCarty. Big fat maple top, probably about the same. And then the 25.594, so slightly shorter than the traditional Gibson scale of 24.75. So it's not 0.75, it's 0.594, which is like 594, 9/16. Scale length, a little shorter than the traditional Gibson, as we have come to know them. So it was just on my mind, and I contacted Clay. I had ended up, you know, I made a point to connect with him and talk to him a little bit during the whole clinic, the whole thing. And I contacted him afterwards, and seeing as this video is getting very long, the long and short of it is I dogged him, you know, and he said more or less it's, you know, kind of not really supposed to, because this is the model that's supposed to show all the other people, but I think he saw that in some sense there might be a benefit to, certainly to me and to him personally on some level, but moreover maybe a benefit to going a little bit out of the way to make an inroad in a relationship for the sake of myself with PRS guitars and vice versa. This is not like an artist or anything like that, but just to say it certainly did a lot for the brand equity and the loyalty and the sense of connection. You know, from a sales perspective, I could see how that made a lot of sense for him. And I don't just mean sales like let's get him in the funnel and get his money. I mean sales at its best, you know, serving a community of like-minded people and products being essentially the gateway to that relationship. And so there you have it. So Clay Lord, shout out Boscoe France, big shout out Dustie Waring, big shout out, and Nakota Linca, aka Christopher Gregg, owner of Guitars USA. Certainly without those 4 individuals, and then of course many more small players, like everything that happens in life, it takes everybody to make anything happen. But those 4 in particular, if it weren't for them playing the part that they were playing, this guitar wouldn't be here with me with later, October 2018, I want to say. Maybe? No, October 17, with Paul's signature on it. He came about 6 months later that year. And with, you know, my first solid ding there on the top, and I don't know if you can tell from the body, but also with an awful lot, not just of smudges, but an awful lot of playwear on it. So this I intend, as much as I am able, to be my lifetime guitar, the guitar that should any of my nieces or nephews, or should I ever be blessed to have a child of my own that was interested in music and guitars and that I trusted an awful lot, the one that I would pass on to them. So that's my story. This, we hope, is going to be the beginning of a series of people telling some stories about their gear and what it has meant to them in their lives. And of course I could go on and on about what that part, but for now we'll leave it here as kind of an introduction. So sooner or later we'll have a name, and we'll have maybe more set up system for people to submit videos and share your story. It doesn't need to be PRS, it's nothing like that, just your gear and what it has meant to you. And especially these difficult times that we're in right now, they're just a chapter. It's not easy to feel that way all the time, but that's just a fact. That's not me being optimistic. It's just look at history. Things recover, things go different directions. It changes. So even when the coronavirus, quarantine, all of that stuff is over and we're not all sort of cooped up in our houses trying to figure out how to feed ourselves and not go crazy, I hope that we will look back at this time with inspiration to look at what were the things that got us through. Because as much as we need jobs and as much as we need money and all of those, and insurance and all of those things that make life livable, it is the guitars, the books, the dance, the poetry, the comedy, the crafts, the humanities, the things that make us human are the things that give us that reason to live, something worth living for. These are the things that get us through times like this, and that's what this video is about for me, is the story of something that is a tool, it is an instrument, and in some senses, it's a prop. Like I said, these products are kind of gateways to relationships when it comes to the sales world. And as far as the rest of life, I think in a lot of ways, you know, this instrument is not about playing the guitar. It's not about itself. It's about something that it points you towards. It's a portal to music and to making music and to all the things that give you the means to create that beautiful vision that's in your mind, or at least to try to. And I think these kinds of props, these physical objects, are very powerful in that way. So I've gone a little bit out there. You'll see a little bit into the mind of Josh, but that tells you something of why I made this video, why I think it's worthwhile to talk about these precious things, whether it is a, you know, really nice, somewhat fancy core PRS guitar, or whether it is your Squire classic vibe, or whether it is your baby Taylor or whatever, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. They're precious if you love them and if you care for them and if you have a relationship with them. So that is, that's my story. And this has gone on a long time. Y'all are very kind to listen. So thank you. Stay tuned for details on how you might also share your story of your gear. This is meant to be a door opening, an introduction, but not at all a template. It's not like you have to do what I did or say what I said about your guitar or whatever. I just had a great story to tell about this instrument, and so I wanted to tell it. Thank you again, Dustie Waring, Claiborne Lord, PRS Guitars, Paul, Boscoe France, PRS Guitars artist. Check out his music. And again, to Nakota Linca, aka Christopher Gregg, owner at Guitars USA, for helping me find the way to bring this instrument into my life. Appreciate all of y'all watching. Thank you. Bye-bye.